November 24th, 1947. A courtroom in Krakow, Poland. A woman sits in the dock wearing a plain dress, her hands folded in her lap, her face arranged into something approaching composure. She looks ordinary, unremarkable. The kind of face you would pass in a market and forget within seconds. The tribunal had just determined she was personally responsible for the deaths of 500,000 human beings. Who was Maria Mandl before she became this? What turned a cheerful Catholic girl from a quiet Austrian village into the most feared woman in the Nazi concentration camp system? And what happened in that Krakow courtroom that finally brought her to the end she had handed to 500,000 others? Maria Mandl was born on January 10th, 1912, in the small village of Münzkirchen, Austria. Her father, Franz, was a master shoemaker. He's a devoted Catholic who publicly opposed the Nazis and supported the Christian Social Party. A former local mayor later described the Mandl family as good Catholics, definitely against the Third Reich. Her mother, Anna, suffered from severe depression throughout Maria's childhood. The house was stable on the surface. Underneath it was not. Maria left school at 12 to help on the farm. She later completed a program at a Catholic boarding school. A classmate named Paula Bauer remembered her as cheerful and very nice. Nobody who knew her then would have believed what was coming. After school, she drifted. Housekeeper in Switzerland for 13 months. Chambermaid in Innsbruck. Back home to care for her parents. Then a stable job at the local post office and a fiancé, a soldier in the German army. Though for a woman who had spent her 20s searching, it felt like an arrival. Then came March 12th, 1938. German troops crossed into Austria. Crowds cheered and church bells rang. Inside homes like the Mandls, families who had opposed the Nazis watched everything they had built begin to collapse. Maria lost her post office job because of her family's political background. Then her fiancé ended the engagement. He couldn't afford the association. Her family's history was a liability to his career in the Reich. He chose ambition and walked away without looking back. In one season, she lost her job, her relationship, and her place in the world she had known. In September 1938, she moved to Munich to live with her uncle, a police officer, hoping he could place her in law enforcement. No positions were available. He pointed her somewhere else, or a guard position at a concentration camp. Better pay than nursing. She said yes. Maria Mandl walked into Lichtenberg concentration camp on October 15, 1938. She passed a 20-question Nazi doctrine exam, swore personal loyalty to Adolf Hitler, and underwent ideological training. Her cousin, Maria Gruber, trained alongside her. Gruber quit within weeks, disgusted by what she witnessed. Mandl stayed. When a prisoner once told her she was too pretty to play supervisor, Mandl replied, "No, I swore the oath to the Führer. I'm staying." She was already someone else entirely. Survivors Emily Noy and Lena Hoog later testified that Mandl forced prisoners through brutal exercises and beatings. In one incident, she grabbed a metal key and beat a prisoner unconscious, dragged her body across the camp and threw her into a solitary cell. The cheerful girl her classmates remembered was gone. On May 15, 1939, she was transferred to Ravensbrück, the central women's camp in the Nazi system. More than 130,000 women passed through it. Most never came out. Mandl patrolled with a trained attack dog. If she disliked a prisoner, sometimes for no visible reason, she released it. Survivors described women torn apart in the yard. She always carried a whip. Roll calls were a special kind of cruelty. In the early morning cold, Mandl forbade prisoners from wearing shoes. They stood barefoot on frozen ground from 4 in the morning until 6, sometimes longer. An older prisoner once slipped a scrap of newspaper under her feet for warmth. Mandl spotted it, beat her unconscious, and had her dragged to the punishment block. One survivor described Mandl kicking an elderly woman in a corridor until she stopped moving entirely. No reason, no warning, simply because she could. The women whispered when they saw her coming, "She's here." Everyone fell silent. Everyone looked down. If you believe these stories deserve to be remembered, subscribe now and hit the bell. Don't let history bury them a second time. In October 1942, Mandl arrived at Auschwitz-Birkenau as its Schutzhaftlagerführerin, the highest-ranking female position in the entire Nazi camp system. Her only superior was Commandant Rudolf Höss, who trusted her completely. In March 1944, he gave her a salary increase and expanded her authority over all female subcamps in the Auschwitz complex. She referred to prisoners as Mistbandwürmer, dung beetles. At the camp gate, she held a cane 50 centimeters above the ground. Prisoners returning from labor details were forced to jump over it. Those who made it went to roll call. Those who failed went to the gas chamber. Survivor Anita Lasker-Wallfish testified that if a prisoner accidentally made eye contact with Mandl at the gate, they were pulled from the line and killed. She tore children from their mothers' arms and sent them to the crematoria. When mothers tried to follow, she beat them to the ground. She signed death lists every single week. Then, in April 1943, Mandl did something that nobody expected. She created the Women's Orchestra of Auschwitz. It was not mercy. It was control dressed as culture. She proposed the idea to the SS leadership, secured approval from Höss, sourced instruments, many taken from Jewish deportees who had arrived at Birkenau with everything they owned, and in August 1943, arranged the personal transfer of Alma Rosé, an Austrian violinist and niece of composer Gustav Mahler, to conduct the ensemble. What followed is one of the strangest relationships in the history of the war. Mandl, who sent 500,000 people to their deaths, developed what survivors described as genuine respect for Alma Rosé. She called her Frau Alma. When Rosé fell ill, Mandl gave her a private recovery room. She told her directly, "You will be the last to go to the gas chamber." Orchestra survivor Helena Dunich-Niewinska later recalled, "When I observed her during a successful concert, her face would radiate. She would take on an expression of deep soulfulness. The same face, the same woman, is radiant at music in the morning, signing death lists in the afternoon." On April 5, 1944, Alma Rosé died suddenly at 38 years old. Mandl openly mourned her. She allowed every orchestra member to say goodbye. A small number of those musicians survived the war because of their place in the ensemble. Millions of others did not. By December 1944, Soviet forces were closing in from the east. Mandl was transferred to the Mühldorf subcamp of Dachau, where 500 female prisoners were being worked to death building underground factories for German jet aircraft. On May 1, 1945, American forces arrived. Mandl fled into the woods. She eventually made her way back to Münzkirchen, to her father's door. Franz Mandl, the man who had defied the Nazis his entire life, who had been described as definitely against the Third Reich, looked at his daughter and turned her away. She sought shelter with her sister. On August 10, 1945, American forces arrested her. The Auschwitz trial opened in Krakow on November 24, 1947. 44 former SS personnel stood before the Polish Supreme National Tribunal. Mandl was one of only 4 women among them. She denied everything at first. Then on March 5, 1947, she confessed, admitting to signing most of the death lists. The Echo Krakowa newspaper described her during sentencing. She does her best to be in control of herself, but her efforts are futile. The woman who condemned prisoners to death with a single gesture now cannot control her accelerated breathing, her unnatural blush, the nervous twitching of her entire face. On December 22, 1947, Aishi was sentenced to death by hanging. She wrote a personal appeal for clemency to Polish President Bierut. It was rejected. In the days before her execution, she prayed in her cell, wept, and sought forgiveness from a fellow prisoner, Stanisława Rakowska, a Catholic Auschwitz survivor awaiting her own execution in an adjacent cell. 2 women separated by a wall, one responsible for 500,000 deaths, the other a resistance fighter, both praying. On the morning of January 24, 1948, 21 former Nazi personnel were hanged one by one. Mandl was last. She had heard every execution before hers, each one bringing the sound closer. When her turn came, she screamed. She fought. Guards dragged her physically across the prison courtyard toward the gallows. She resisted every single step. Then, at the very last moment, she closed her eyes and spoke her final words. In Polish, Polska żyje, Poland lives. At 7:32 in the morning, the execution was complete. Her body was transferred to the Jagiellonian University Medical College for 6 weeks of medical study. On March 6, 1948, she was buried in an unmarked wooden box at Rakowicki Cemetery in Krakow. Her father did not request her remains. The Mandl family tomb in Münzkirchen does not carry her name. Maria Mandl was not born into power. She was handed an opportunity in a collapsing world and chose cruelty every single day for 7 years. She was also a woman who wept at violin concerts, who mourned Alma Rose, who prayed in a cell before she was hanged. The 500,000 who died under her authority did not get a cell. They did not get a priest. They did not get last words. She spent 7 years deciding who lived and who died. On January 24th, 1948, someone else made that decision for her. If this story moved you, subscribe now and turn on notifications. There are more stories like this one. Men and women history almost forgot. And we are just getting started.